The Midwest supporting, Bruiser loving, positivity spreading, world's most dangerous podcast. Join former pro wrestler and promoter Dave Dynasty as he supports and promotes Midwest pro wrestling. Keep on growing with the Midwest Express. This is the Dave Dynasty Show.
And welcome to the Dave Dynasty Show. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us today on a spectacular episode, a monumental episode, a landmark episode in the history of podcasts. Maybe I'm just tooting my own horn too much, but what the hey. I'm loving it today. We have an interview with Terry Sullivan, and I could not be more excited. When I started this podcast, and especially when we focused in and just decided, hey, all we wanted to do was Midwest Pro Wrestling, Terry Sullivan was a top 5 guy that I would like to talk to for multiple reasons, because he was there in Detroit. He was there with Bruiser Bedlam, and he has so much experience and has been there so much. And the thing that really was cool to me is he hasn't told a story, right? He had not done a podcast appearance. He had not done interviews. He'd answered some questions online on some message boards and things like that, but he had a lot to tell. So I'm so excited that we finally got to touch base with him, finally got to interview him in his first podcast experience right here on the Dave Dynasty Show. You will not be disappointed. It's a great, great, great interview. Before we get there, I don't know, man. I'm so excited. I just jumped right to it, right? Just skipped all the news and the information and all the business at hand. Caught up in the moment. Oh man, isn't that the great thing about pro wrestling? You can get caught up in the moment. Well, once upon a time, you can get caught up in the moment. We don't do that here, do we? Right? We don't talk like that. Thank you for joining us on whatever platform you do. Like I said, we're available on all podcast platforms. I tell you this every week, and it is true. However, you can get a podcast. We're there. Just search us out, the Dave Dynasty Show. We're there. Just subscribe to us, and you'll never miss an episode. That easy. We're on iTunes, YouTube, we're on Soundcloud, we're et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is your preference, we're there. So just subscribe to us. And when you listen to these episodes, please go and share them for us. And then go and like them. And go give us a rating and a review. All that stuff helps with our networking, helps our word get out there, our name get out there. And that's what it's all about. We need you guys. You guys, our listeners, you're our street team. You are people out there who are supporting us and listening to us, and we need your help in continuing to grow. The more we grow, the more guests we can get on. The more guys like Terry Sullivan that we can get on the show. I've made contact with a couple of guys that I'm going to interview here in the next couple of weeks, and these are pretty good interviews. Well, great interviews, honestly. And the cool thing is one of them, a guy that I watched for many, 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 many years, and I'm a very big fan of, and it has accomplished a lot in the professional wrestling business, told me he'd heard of me, and he'd heard of our work, and was really impressed with it. And that's thanks to you guys, right? That's thanks to you guys out there sharing and spreading the word. And we appreciate it. Keep doing it. Keep plugging away. We keep on growing, and that's what it's all about. Building this foundation, showing the world that, hey, man, Midwest professional wrestling's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. Got a great history. Lots of names and lots of things. There are lots of stories and people we have to tell and talk to, and we will over time. We are on that march to the 100th episode. I've got some pretty fun things lined up for the 100th episode. Hopefully, everything pans out. As it always is with anything associated with the world of professional wrestling, the card is subject to change. But one of those interviews that I've got lined up is for the 100th episode. And that should be fun. I've got a couple returning guests that we're going to catch back up with that we hope to talk to. I'm hoping this weekend we're going to talk to them. Should be fun. Some guys that you really got into and really dug that we had on here in the past. So we're going to talk to them again. See what they're up to now. See what's going on. It's always good to chat with these guys. So while you're out there and perusing the intranet, doing your thing, make sure you like us everywhere. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Do all those things. You can go to davedynasty.com, find the links to all those things, or you can just look us up. Follow us. That way you don't ever miss anything we share, because there's a lot more kind of in our little universe than just this podcast. I'm sharing pictures all the time. I'm sharing videos. I'm sharing links and things that other people put out there. There's lots of things that we like to be involved with, and by following us on social media, you can hear all those things. You can follow all those things. And while you're there, make sure you check us out on Pro Wrestling Tees. I know I say this every week, guys. We do bring you a free show, right? And it's a lot of work, right? With the scheduling the interviews, the doing the research that we do, the recording, the editing, all that stuff. It takes a lot of time, and it takes money. For the equipment, we're constantly looking to upgrade. We have to replace things every now and then. We're getting out and making appearances. Things like that cost money to do, and there's obviously no charge for a broadcast, right? We enjoy bringing it to you for free. That's what we do. It's what we'll always do. But if you just help us out in one of the ways you can, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to Pro Wrestling Tees, look up the Dave Dynasty Show, buy a shirt. We have that new Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. shirt that's been selling pretty well. It's a very, very cool shirt. Go out there and buy one. You won't be disappointed. We also have the Dave Dynasty Show logo shirt and the Midwest Express shirt. Buy one of all three. We get some money off those. It helps us out. And hey, you get a shirt. You get this cool shirt to wear. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. Or you can make an ongoing monthly contribution through patreon.me/TheDaveDynasty. We would appreciate that. Even a couple bucks thrown our way every month greatly, greatly helps us. Or you can make a one-time donation by going to paypal.me/TheDaveDynasty. We also appreciate that. Like I said, anything you give us goes right back into the show, which just in turn just helps us to give you a better product that hopefully you are enjoying. Speaking of enjoying, I know a show coming up that you're going to enjoy, an event. We can't even call it a show. It is an event. It is the Heroes and Legends Fan Fest, Heroes and Legends 11. It will be held Saturday, October 27th in Fort Wayne, Indiana. There is a whole slew of stars that are going to be there, past and present. Going to be a great wrestling show that night, a great, like a fan convention that day. Well, you will be able to meet lots of people, including us, the Dave Dynasty Show. We will be there Saturday, October 27th. Don't miss that. Heroes and Legends 11 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You will want to be there. And you know what? Come to meet all the big stars. Come to see the wrestling show. But stop by and say hi and see us while you're there. We appreciate that. So, I'd like to talk a little here. Kind of got me thinking with the Terry Sullivan review. I talk about the role. We talked last week about the role of fans in the wrestling show and how important that was. But this week, let's talk about the role of the commentators and how important that is, right? Because great wrestling can tell a story in the ring and needs no more. If it's truly great, needs nothing else to elicit that emotion from you. But a good commentator can really push it to next level. And even more importantly, a good commentator can get your interest in kind of a bad match or a mediocre match. They can help build you that interest there, help tell that story, and make it a little more worthwhile for you. That is their role. A good commentator to be supplements the product, doesn't overtake the product. There are lots of guys out there today that is doing commentary over DVD and video releases. I hear them all the time on clips and doing these hype videos and different things. I don't know what all they do, and man, some of them, it's too much. They're trying to put themselves over. They're trying to say, oh, "Hey, look at me," and that's not really the role, right? That's not really what the purpose is. The purpose of a commentator should really be to put the product over and the wrestlers over, and to help seal that deal. And the key is not only knowing what to say and when to say it, but knowing when not to say anything. And there are some greats out there, Terry Sullivan being one of them, obviously. Everybody's got their favorites. It's much like professional baseball. Sometimes the commentator that you like can be a regional thing, right? Whatever you grew up on, the product you grew up on, whoever you hear, that's what sinks into you, right? That's what gets into your soul and is a part of your life, and that's what you love. Much like the wrestlers. There are regional wrestlers that a guy in another territory, another area, just they don't get. It's like, why is this guy who he is? But your local guy, you get it, and you know. And it's still that way even today in the independent scene. There are guys that, it's like the new territorial system almost. There are guys that are regional that people love, that maybe people in other parts of the country or the parts of the world, maybe they don't know them or just don't get into them quite as much or don't see that as quite as much. But like I said, I don't know. I don't know what my take home is from this. Appreciate a good commentator. Obviously, we notice the bad ones because it's hard to even see a decent match or a good match or even a great match with bad commentary. I mean, sometimes I watch certain things and I just mute it. I don't want to hear something that's going to ruin it for me. But the good guys, the good ones, the great ones out there, you know who they are, whoever your favorites are. I'm not even really going to list off the names. Everybody knows there's the names that everybody lists, but your favorites, whoever they are, you know that what they add to the product. And if you're out there and you think that just doing commentary, I've done some commentary in my time, done a little bit of everything, but and if you think that commentary is just an easy thing, you just sit down and talk about wrestling, it's not. I have to chuckle when I see guys online that say that, oh, if you need a commentator, hey, I could talk about wrestling all day. Yeah, that's not what it's all about, right? Commentary is not just about talking about wrestling. There's a lot more to it, and it's really kind of an insult to the guys that have worked hard and commit themselves to it and have committed to it to say that. So it's a little insulting in my eyes. So guys, if you're doing any commentary out there, then do your homework, right? And watch the greats and learn and always improve, right? Even if you're bad now, doesn't mean you'll be bad always. Everybody works to improve, but just make sure you are, like anything, putting in the work. But we're going to take a quick break now. I'm going to get off my soapbox about commentators and take a break. And when we come back, we'll let the commentator speak for himself and tell his story. When we come back, we will have a longtime announcer for Big Time Wrestling in Detroit and the voice of Bruiser Bedlam, Terry Sullivan, so stick around. You've heard him here on the Dave Dynasty Show as a guest and as host of the monthly Graham's Gallery episodes, and now you can hear his stories. You can own a copy of Confessions of a Big Time Wrestler, the audio book from Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., former multi-tag team champion in WWA and owner of Bruiser Bedlam. You can hear all of his encounters with the various wrestlers, places, and promotions he's worked as he tells about his colorful, long, and illustrious career. You can have your own copy for only $25, and that includes shipping and handling. It's very simple. Go on Facebook, look up Jerry Jaffe, Jaffe, send him a private message, and make arrangements to purchase a copy of Confessions of a Big Time Wrestler now. You will not regret this purchase. And welcome back to the Dave Dynasty Show. At this point, we are joined by one of the voices of Detroit wrestling and the voice of Bruiser Bedlam, Mr. Terry Sullivan. Terry, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's an honor to talk to you, Terry. You've been on my list of guys I've really wanted to talk to for quite a while now. So,
well, I appreciate it. You know what? This is the first podcast I have ever done.
Well, that makes it even more exciting because we like to do first. So,
and you never forget your first time,
that's
right?
That's what they tell me. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's jump right into it. Why don't let's give just a little background for those that may not be real familiar with you. Where are you from, Terry?
I was born and raised in a small town near Toledo.
And so, when you look back, what were your first memories of professional wrestling from your childhood?
My first memory was the tag team of Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy. Now, this would have been probably around 1960 on Detroit TV, and I'm just a kid at that point, tuning around. I'd never seen wrestling before, and so that's my first impression. Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy, two of the biggest heels and one of the greatest heel tag teams of all time, and I was fascinated. My dad said, "Oh, you don't want to watch that. Turn on something else."
Yeah.
It went from there, and I didn't seek it out on a regular basis probably for a few more years, but once I did, I was hooked.
Yeah. Well, so when did you cross that line? You said it was a few years you started pursuing. When did you cross the line where you started to think, man, I'd like to be a part of this in some capacity?
Probably when I was, almost a teenager. One of my heroes was Lord Layton.
Right.
And Lord Layton was the commentator for Big Time Wrestling. He was also commentator for the Tunnies in Toronto for a number of years. And before he did Detroit, he was a commentator in Cleveland. And in addition to being a commentator, he was also a major figure as a wrestler, main eventer for, going back a decade or more. Now, this is starting in the 60s in Detroit. And wherever he appeared, he was pretty much, a major wrestling figure. But to me, he was the voice, he was the persona of big-time wrestling. And around that time, I was developing an interest in broadcast, wanted to do TV and radio. And I thought, wow, it'd be cool to be a wrestling commentator, but you got to be a wrestler to do that, like Lord Layton. Then as time went on, around 67, 68, something like that, Bob Finnegan came in he had been a former DJ in Texas, and he came in as basically the ring announcer and the guy they took on the road as the ring announcer. And Lord Layton took a sabbatical to Australia for 6 months or something like that, and Finnegan took over. And I'm thinking, wow, hey, maybe there is a chance that I could do this.
Right. So how did you get your foot in the door? How did you make that first step to get involved?
I bugged the hell out of people. Absolutely did. I made a huge nuisance of myself, and I got to know the promoter in Toledo, Martino Angelo, and he enjoyed talking to me, and I think enjoyed my enthusiasm, and started giving me comp tickets and let me in the back door of the musky old Toledo sports arena. And you know, I can't believe now, looking back, that I was as forward as I was in terms of talking to the wrestlers and a lot of the heel wrestlers.
Right.
Not just the faces. I would approach a lot of the heels. Of course, never the Sheik.
Yeah, right.
Nobody ever went near him.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, yeah, I just made a nuisance of myself with them, and over a period of time, got to know them. And people like the Stomper, Tex McKenzie, the Stompers from Indianapolis, Guy Mitchell.
Yep.
Went on to be Jerry Valiant and numerous other personas over the years. But he and his wife were just fantastic to me. And as time went on, the guys, I think, began to accept me a little bit. And then it got to the point where I was a little older and would start to investigate the bars they headed to after the matches. And then I went to college in Cincinnati. And Les Ruffin was the promoter in Cincinnati. And Martino Angelo, the Toledo promoter, asked Les to see what you can do with him, because Les had a reputation. And in fact, Les worked in Indy for quite a while when Barnett was running the Indianapolis territory.
Right.
And then Les came on to Cincinnati for Barnett, and then evolved into when the Sheik and Big Time took over Cincinnati. So Les Ruffin started me announcing in Dayton, and that was the first time I ever did it. And Mike Lauren, who was a wrestler and worked in the office, was running some towns, namely Mansfield and Sandusky, Ohio, once a month on each of those towns. And he says, hey, I'll bring you up, pay you a little money, and you can start doing those. And gradually then the Sheik got wind of me, and he said to me, he invited me up to do Kobo and a TV shoot, and I did it, and the rest is history.
Right. Now you mentioned Angelo. Is this the same guy that trained Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., correct? Yours. Yep. So when did you meet Jerry?
Jerry was around Toledo right about the same time I was.
Okay, so I thought
he's a little bit older than I am, but yeah, he was around. I knew him. I was aware of him. We weren't friendly or anything like that initially, but I knew that he wanted to get started, and he and I think I started a little bit before him.
Okay, so you say the Sheik brought you up. Tell us, what is it like working for the Sheik? Because you hear all these fascinating stories. So,
he was a fascinating man. He truly was, and it was a dream for me to work for professional wrestling. And when it got to the point that I realized that the Sheik was the guy in charge, it was like, whoa, this is crazy. Initially, it couldn't be. You know, the Sheik doesn't speak English. He's a savage.
Right.
That's the way they portrayed him on TV. But, working for him was never dull. He was, to me, a mythical figure because of everything he had done in the wrestling business from the start of network TV, being one of the chosen few to appear on network television out of Chicago, to then owning his own territory, and then still being a guy who made the trips to Japan starting in the early 70s, and going to L.A., going to New York, Washington, going to Florida, Texas, and main eventing, in addition to doing his own territory. But working for him was really something. He was a good guy to work for. He was intensely loyal to the people who worked for him. He treated us like family. He truly did. And, invited us over to the house. For a time, the office was in his house.
Right.
But when I started in the office, he had a storefront downtown in Williamston, Michigan. But he was an incredible guy to work for. He really was. He didn't bother me all that much as far as critiquing my announcing. I almost wish he would have a little more, but he sort of let me have my head. And, as long as I did what I was expected to do, I was fine.
Right. So tell us, what's the first, growing up watching the Sheik, and as you said, this mythical figure, what's it like the first time you hear him speak? And he cracks that gimmick a little bit for you.
That was something. He had a sort of a gravelly, low voice. It was sort of hoarse, throaty, along the lines of Dick the Bruiser, but not quite that guttural.
Right.
He was always like, I always tell people he was like the Godfather. That's the way people regarded him.
Yeah.
It was like he was the Godfather. He was it. But the first time I heard him speak English was in the parking lot of the Cincinnati Gardens, and Les Ruffin said, "Go out there, the Sheik wants to talk to you." And that's when he told me that, I'm probably crapping my drawers about that time. That's when he told me that he wanted to bring me up to do TV. He says, "Go ahead and buy a black suit." He says, "I'll pay for it." And he said, "If you ever tell anybody I talked to you, I'll rip your tongue out."
Right. So this was in the early, and this was in the early 70s, right? And you were with him up until the end, right? Correct, till the early 80s or whatever. So.
Yep, up until the bitter end.
Yeah, and so you were kind of there as you saw the decline. Now the story, people always say that much like Bruiser, Sheik's territory, they kind of aged themselves out. Sheik was always on top, and Bruiser was always on top, and eventually it lost that luster, and the refusal kind of to step aside for the young Ted. Did you see some of that while you were there? That maybe that was an issue.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the wrestlers were saying it, and it was sort of hard to deny that, hey, this could be a factor. But he did step back. Around the time that Mark Lewin and the Funks were in,
right,
and Gary Hart. And they came in to be the saviors, and God love them, and I have all the respect in the world for him, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
But the Sheik did back off. He would book himself out on the Cobo Saturday nights, and this was already during the decline. And, we went from 12,000, 10,000, 9,000, something like that.
Yeah.
We were declining into probably 4,000 and 5,000. But then when the Sheik would book himself out and he wasn't there, you can automatically just knock at least another 1,500 or 2,000 off of the attendance on those shows.
Right.
And he'd come back, and eventually he'd come back, and boom, the crowds would go up. There was that automatic audience that came just to see him. They took the belt off him, didn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, so now when you're coming in with him, were you there at all with the battle in Detroit with him and Bruiser?
That started about 71, and I wasn't. Yeah, I started about 71 in Detroit, probably a little bit later, a year or so later.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was very much aware of it. And I think Bruiser came into Olympia in Detroit, about 71?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere in that 71 to 73 range, somewhere in there,
Yeah. So I started working full-time in June of 73, and that was very much during the opposition thing, the Olympia versus Cobo thing, and then the Ultimate Resolution.
Yeah. So were you there for any of those? They had some really stacked cards where the NWA would really rally behind the Sheik and everybody was sending talent. Were you there for any of those real stacked cards when they were running opposition?
I was not.
Okay.
I was certainly aware of them, but at that time I was in college in Cincinnati and didn't make the trips. But, yeah, I certainly remember them.
Yeah, okay. So, and as the decline happens towards the early 80s, with you being a part of it, did it come as any surprise to you when the end finally came, or is it just this feeling of, this was coming, and
Yeah, it pretty much was. I mean, things had been on a decline for a number of years. And I think the peak was probably around 72 or 73, around there. I think the best years were the late 60s through like 73.
Yeah.
And the decline started around then. And I got to tell you what there's I think a lot of factors involved, but if you want, I'll tell you what I think was the biggest factor.
Okay.
And that was television.
Okay.
We went from Channel 50 in Detroit, which is a 1,000,000-watt mega MFer station, which covered all of Michigan, a lot of northern Ohio and Ontario, parts of Ontario, which was the area we were running.
Right.
And we had what at that time was considered the prime wrestling time, Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock and sometimes noon. And we promoted Detroit off of that. You could promote Toledo, all of Michigan, etc., along with some of the Ontario towns. Now, in addition to that, we had 2 hours a week on Channel 20, which was seen all over Detroit and all over the suburbs and everything like that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Channel 50 was no longer there. I don't know exactly why. I suspect it was money. I mean, anything can be had for a price.
Right, yeah.
And I suspect the contract came up, and the Sheik was no longer willing to fork out the dollars that they demanded. And then Channel 20 evolved into Channel 62. It literally became Channel 62. Channel 20 became sort of a paid channel, and Channel 62 now, this is the station that we're on exclusively at that point. They couldn't even pick up Channel 62 in most of Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit proper. And this is before cable.
Yeah.
So if your little antenna, your little rabbit ears antenna, or the antenna on your roof didn't allow you to pick up 62, then you no longer saw our product.
Yeah.
So that's like all of a sudden disappearing in the eyes of a lot of people, and certainly mine. Because, you can bring in Dory Funk, you can bring in, superstar Billy Graham and Bruno and Backlund like they did. Yeah. But if nobody's watching your show to see that they're coming,
right?
Well, you're screwed,
because
there was no other means of advertising the shows.
Yeah. Well,
that was it. They depended on TV and maybe a little 1x3 newspaper ad.
Yeah. And there in the early 80s, I mean, I think the whole landscape of wrestling was also changing. I mean, Vince Jr. was getting ready to go national, and I think everything nationwide was starting to change, and that shift was affecting everybody around that time. And like you said,
absolutely.
I mean, the advent of cable television was really starting to come in, and it was starting to develop. And I think it was just so many shifts that affected not just Detroit, but I think just wrestling as a whole at that time.
Yeah. And the city of Detroit wasn't wired for cable for a long, long time, but its suburbs were, cities in Ohio were, and that's when when TBS started being a major factor in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Now, they never came into Detroit proper because there was no cable penetration in the Detroit metro, but they, of course, came into West Virginia and throughout Ohio and everything, and they've got their TV in a prominent place, once or twice a week, and so wow, look at that. They drew. Imagine that.
Yeah, really.
So I think the TV was a major factor.
Sure.
The economy in Detroit is another one. The formula, the Sheik's formula, and that evolved over a period of time where he would have excellent matches, and but then at the end screw the baby face and come back the next time with a Texas death match or a cage match or whatever it was. But then that evolved into these 5-minute matches. There'd be blood instantaneously, and Bruno Sammartino he comes in, does a 5-minute match, and that's it.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah,
no, not gonna work.
Yeah. So after Big Time Wrestling shuts down there in the early '80s, so what did you do for immediately following that? Where did you go to?
Nowhere. I started doing radio,
right,
and had a real strong run with radio in Toledo at FM 104 WIOT. We were sort of like FBQ, same type of format, rock and roll.
Yep.
And so I had a real good run there. And Bruiser Bedlam started about the end of my good run in radio. I went to work for another station, which was not a great situation at all.
Uh-huh.
But that's about the time, talking now about 88, late 80s or so.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the time that the Bruiser Bedlam came into being.
Yeah, so tell us how that happened. Who did Jerry call you when he was buying in, and how did that develop where you became a part of Bruiser Bedlam?
Yeah, he called me and says, "Do you want to do this?" And I said, "Oh man, I don't know." And then he said, "Well, come over to some of my shows." And so I went to. He was running some shows locally in Toledo, and I came to his shows and one of his shows, and he said, "Hey, do you want to start announcing for me?" Yeah, okay, I'll start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the guys were very familiar, like Don Kent, Bobo, and Flying Fred Curry, and Wojo, the great Wojo, and of course Jerry himself. And so I knew a lot of the guys. And then Jerry said, "Hey, going to get together with Bruiser and start at the Premier Center," which was this high-class arena in Detroit, or in Sterling Heights outside of Detroit. And we've got TV with this Pass, which was a sort of like a Fox Sports 1, maybe.
Right, yeah.
It was an all-sports cable channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure who was putting up the money, whether it was Pass or exactly who it was, but, it allowed us to start airing on their cable channel in Detroit, and had a good run for a while.
Yep, right. Yeah, I think there was a lot of pieces. Talking to Jerry, I think there was the Sam Botek, the Miller Lite thing, and lots of pieces fell in for him there, and with sponsorships to get on. So you started in, and then hosting Bedlam and stuff, and at least early on, it was you and Bruiser, correct? You were doing these openings and doing the cover. So what was it like working with Bruiser at that point? He's kind of older, primarily just doing commentary. I know he did get involved a little here and there, but so what was it like doing those opening bits with him and doing the commentary with Bruiser?
Well, he was great. I hadn't grown up so much with Bruiser. His time in Detroit didn't cross over too much with my interest as a young kid. I'm certainly aware of him, and certainly aware of him as the head of the indie territory and the head of the opposition promotion in Detroit. So, yeah, he was an icon to me, and I have all the respect in the world for people like him. It was he was cool. He was a little out of his element as a commentator.
Right.
It's really difficult to get him to open up.
Yeah.
And I kept throwing him all these lines, and all of a sudden there's nothing. There's nothing coming at me. Crickets,
Yeah.
And there came a time then when they wanted to put a third person in the booth with us, and I said, "No way.
Yeah.
This is Bruiser Bedlam, and let me try to open him up a little bit more." And he did to some extent, but like I say, that wasn't really his thing.
Yeah.
But initially, he was dead serious about it, and over a period of time, there were a few funny moments that came up that I sort of jumped on, and he jumped on as well. And from then on, he started throwing a little humor into it when it was appropriate. So that opened him up a little more.
Yeah.
But he was a great guy. But, the interesting thing was I never saw him other than what we did on TV, the opens, and at the desk doing commentary. I never saw the guy.
Yeah.
He would fly in. I would drive in. I'd usually get there late because I was doing my regular job.
Yeah.
And as soon as I walked in, it's like, okay, go into the room, do the opens with Bruiser, and then you'd see him for the shows, and he'd go his way, and I'd go mine.
Yeah. I suspect probably by that time he was probably primarily living in his condo down in Florida, probably, and just coming in to do that. Would be.
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, they flew him in and got him, rented him a car, and or picked him up. I don't know how that worked, but yeah, that was about it.
Yeah, during the Bedlam run, there's a lot of a very good chemistry and back and forth with you and Jerry Jaffe, Dr. Jerry Jr. As we talked, you had lots of great bits. I know he did a little bit of the openings with you and the Graham's Gallery that you were involved in a few of those. Did that something that just kind of developed naturally with you guys? I mean, obviously Jerry's a great talker. Obviously you're a great talker. I mean, and he was, had the Hill persona. You had more of the straight lace. Did it just click for you guys as you started doing those kinds of things and you just went with it?
To an extent, but Jerry, like you say, is one of a kind. he is a true mic guy.
Mm-hmm.
He can really, spew the BS. I mean, he has got the gift of gab, and he's so smart and so creative and so innovative. You never know what he's going to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look back at the things, it's mostly him.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to take the time and say who was talking the most, it would be Jerry Graham 90% of the time, me maybe 10.
Yeah.
And the famous Graham's Gallery that he did with me, where he kept trying to get me to say he was the world's greatest wrestler and wrestling manager, that was totally him.
Yeah.
He totally scripted that. Here's what I want to do. Yeah, I want you to keep saying that, and you keep, don't want to say it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was all him.
Yeah. So is that kind of the way the TV went? I mean, was Jerry leading the creative? Was he kind of giving directions or how did it work when you guys were putting this? I know you just came in and did the openings and the commentary, but was Jerry kind of leading the show there and directing people in this, or how was it arranged?
Yep. Yeah, it was mainly Jerry. I think Chris Carter, and another one of the wrestlers. I think he's been in Indy, right? He was in Indy years ago. Gary Warrenchak, who was ostensibly our promoter, I think he had a say in what went on. So I think it was mainly the three of them, but Jerry was the booker. Jerry was in charge, and of course Bruiser, certainly had some leverage.
Right. Yeah.
I think as far as Bruiser was concerned, the more he could let Jerry do the day-to-day stuff, the better.
Yeah. So Bedlam closed up around 89. So at that point, did you just assume that's it? I'm done with wrestling. That's my run's been had, and that was it.
Yep.
So did you feel any?
Absolutely.
Did you feel bitter at all, or does it just got to that point where you thought, well, I kind of already thought I was out and got another little run, and so all's good, or how did you feel knowing that it was probably done for you?
Well, I got out a little bit before Bruiser Bedlam ended. I sort of saw the handwriting on the wall. I sort of saw it coming. And, honestly, I said, I don't want to go down with another ship. I went down with the Sheik. I don't want to go down with this one. And I didn't really think that it would end, but I thought it had peaked. And, unless something drastic happens, it's not going to make it.
Yeah.
And that's why I sort of, I put my tail between the legs and bowed out like a stooge, like a sissy.
Yeah.
But and I'm not proud of that, but that was basically it, and that was the reason, good or bad, that I did that. But yeah, I had no thought that I would ever come back, and as I got older and things evolved in wrestling the way they were, hey, Vince McMahon never called me.
That's right.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why not.
Yeah. So did you go back to radio then after that, and just?
I started right around the time that Bruiser Bedlam ended. I started in '87, actually, working for the University of Toledo.
Okay.
And I started working with their student media operation, teaching some classes, working within the Division of Student Affairs, the Dean of Students Office, and commuter services and career services, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I loved it. And 31 years later, I'm still there.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
greatest move I ever made.
Right. So as you're teaching, were you ever recognized by any students? Did anybody, especially in those early times, anybody ever come and say, "Oh, hey, you're the guy from wrestling on TV"? Or were you ever noticed? Yeah.
Well, they all knew who I was from radio. Mainly at that point. They knew me as being one of the big DJs at FM 104 WIOT. But yeah, to some extent, wrestling, and I'll always remember how one day when James McComas, the president of the University of Toledo, came to me and said, "Well, you do a pretty good job on that wrestling." I said, "Oh my God, you got to be kidding me!"
Oh, that's funny.
I just have insomnia.
So when you said you start teaching and such, did you keep in contact with anybody from the wrestling business, or had you pretty much you were kind of out of sight, out of mind with those guys at that point?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, Jerry called me again in, I think, October or November of last year, and that was the first time. Let's see. Well, honestly, it was when. Are you familiar with the Cobo Legends reunion they did?
I am. Yeah, the XICW. Yeah. Was that kind of your first appearance back into wrestling? since getting out? Or?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. You know Dave Drayson, Supermouth?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, he was working with Malcolm Monroe to put
Mm-hmm.
put that whole thing together, and Dave and I have been friends for 50 years.
Right, uh-huh.
And God, we're old farts, aren't we? But yeah, so Dave called and says, "Yeah, man, we want you to do this." And, oh, damn, I said, dude, nobody knows me anymore. Everybody who watched me is dead, you know.
Yeah.
But now they talked me into it, and right about the same time, Jerry Graham was another one that they contacted to come in for it.
Right.
And Jerry was aware that I was doing it and vice versa. And he called me and says, "Why don't you come to one of the Powerbomb wrestling shows?
Yep.
Just be my guest." And, okay, well, he already had some plans in mind.
Of course.
to bring me back. But honestly, I told him I'm too old. If you want somebody to be your front man, you need somebody 30 years younger and about twice as good looking as I am. And I really believed that. And when I came back, I thought nobody is going to know who I am. Nobody will recognize me. And, honestly, people did.
Right.
Mainly from Bruiser Bedlam, but some of them from big time wrestling.
Yep.
And but they wanted me to come in and sit in on a match. No, man, I've done this 25 years. I couldn't. I don't know a lot of the holds. I didn't know a lot of the holds back then when I did it regularly.
Right.
I knew about as much as Bruiser did. A punch and a knee drop, and that's about all you need to know.
Yeah.
But I told them, guys, I couldn't do that. Then they kept on me. Well, just come in and do one match. And I said, all right, well, I'll do it. I'll try it and see what it'll be like. And they wanted me then that one match became 3, and I sat down and I did it, and I really surprised myself. And how naturally you got the gift of BS, and that never leaves you.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what it is just babbling away and trying to sound confident about it.
Yep.
And I did know more of the holds than I thought. I'm still trying to learn them, though. I'm into the topes and the sentons and the different kinds of suplexes. And I can tell you what a Northern Lights suplex is. And, of course, the what is the one that Scott Steiner does? Not the Steiner line, but when he gives him the head scissors and catapults him off the top ropes.
Oh,
I'm blanking on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think in modern...
in fact, I was there. I saw Scott Steiner's second match.
Oh, yeah? So, okay, so with this would have been after he won the title, right? Because didn't he win his title in his first match in Bedlam, right? He came in...
No, he didn't win it the first time. He'd been in for a few months.
Okay.
Before he finally won the title. But, yeah, his second ever match, it was in Sandusky, Ohio. I have no clue who he wrestled, but I remember thinking, damn, this kid's good.
Yeah.
I've always been so astute at things like that.
Well, what always cracks me up is early on. Obviously he was in phenomenal shape. He was doing lots of things that nobody was doing at that time. But he did that one move that always gets talked about with everybody I ever talked to, where he would do like a 450 almost off the top rope, but land on his feet and then fall on the guy. It was so unique in the way he did it.
Yeah.
But well,
Jerry Graham taught him that,
I'm sure he did. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think Jerry Graham's been up that high.
Yeah. I know. So when
Scotty was obviously, and then he was sane. So that helped a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, he was real innovative. Not only fluid and crisp in his moves, but also innovative.
Yeah. Jerry always said it was just a natural. Said he would show him something, and it'd been like he'd done it for years. It was so natural to him.
And I call him innovative. I suspect though he gotten a hold of some Japan tapes.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. Everybody talks about his Frankensteiner and his Hurricane Ranas. They were doing those in Mexico for years before he was. So
there you go. The Frankensteiner. That's the one I couldn't.
Oh, is that the one?
Name of
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. But there you go. So he was either watching Lucha Libre or Japan tapes. Probably watching luchadors in Japan.
That probably. So as like you said, you had your initial run in Detroit, and you had that second breath in Bedlam that you never thought would come, and now you got a little kind of a third gasp here in Powerbomb Wrestling. So when you look back at your career as a whole so far, so what stands out to you most, and what are you most proud of, or what do you remember the most from your career overall?
Kobo. in Detroit. The first time I ever worked at Kobo, it was a sellout. It was one of 7 straight sellouts they did. I honestly don't remember where my debut fell within those 7, but most of it was the Sheik against Johnny Valentine. Anything involving the Sheik was memorable. I remember one time for Bruiser Bedlam, we did a show at Lucas County Recreation Center as part of the Toledo Mud Hens baseball game. So performing in front of thousands there. Well, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000. That was a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the TV shoots we did were great. The memories I have are of the legends that I grew up with, and that probably well before your time, but working with the legends like Wild Bull Curry and Pampero Purpo, Tex McKenzie, Killer Brooks, and just getting to know those larger than life people that I admired and watched when I was growing up, and then all of a sudden actually being in the car with them or sitting in the dressing room with them.
Yeah.
Those are the great memories that I have, definitely.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Wild Bull Curry through his son, through Fred.
Oh,
Curry.
yeah.
Well, through Fred Curry, because obviously I watched a lot of Fred Curry, and and obviously
and you were in Circleville, weren't you?
I was. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I saw Fred and his son.
His son Nick.
Yeah. He's something else. But so obviously,
is he really?
Oh, he's.
All I've seen of him is the 51-second clip that somebody posted.
Yeah. Oh,
and I thought, well, yeah, he looked good. The moves looked solid.
Yep.
He looked.
He's very athletic, and he's got that grappling background. Done lots of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I heard him do a podcast, and I mean, the guy just talks like a world-class athlete.
Yeah.
You can just tell from the coaching he's gotten through AAU and stuff that he's really got that mindset right.
Yeah, that might have been our show. He was on our show. So, yeah, we interviewed him.
Was he?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, yeah. Yeah, so,
okay.
Yeah, not long before the Circleville show. So, yeah.
But doesn't he just sound like he's got that attitude?
He does.
Do not quit. That.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I think he's going to be. I think that.
He's a good kid. He's good.
I think he said more in that. I think he said more in that podcast, in that hour podcast, than his father did throughout his entire career.
Probably, yeah. So, but anyway, but watching, what I was saying was watching Fred, obviously there's not a lot of Bull Curry out there on video, especially in his prime. But I'm fascinated by him. I've read the book that Fred wrote about him, and I'm just fascinated by Bull. So I've got to ask you here on the tail end, tell me a Bull Curry story. Did you ever travel with him or tell me a Bull Curry story.
Oh my God. I've got to tell you my favorite Bull Curry story. This is a classic. Bull, died and had the first dollar he ever made. Mm-hmm. Bull, though, he had a reputation as being a miser. And, but you know what? Not to end my own story before it started, but I'm thinking he left his family off pretty darn good. And that's what it's all about,
Yeah, right.
But anyway, they used to have a room at the Hillcrest Hotel in downtown Toledo. No, it wasn't the Hillcrest. Whatever. They call it the Bull Curry Special. Mm-hmm. For $2 a night, you could get a room. It essentially was a janitor's closet. That was one of the stories. But then we did a tour of Alaska, and in '73, and Bull was on the trip. And I think as a joke to me, they roomed me with Al Costello and Lou Klein.
Okay.
But 2 people will get that. But anyway, we paid. It was called the Gold Rush Hotel in Fairbanks, Alaska, and it was $35 a night, which is probably the equivalent of $100 now.
Yeah.
But Bull Curry took a look at that and said, screw that, I ain't paying $35 a night. So he didn't spend one night there. Maybe he spent the first night, but then I think the next morning he was off in search of something more along the lines of the Bull Curry Special. And he found this little flea-bitten motel a couple of blocks from us. And I went over to see him, and there he was. He had his suitcase filled with cans of tuna, and he's in this little room with a bed and a bunch of huge cases of toilet paper. It was literally a storeroom.
Oh, that's...
But that's all he needed.
Yeah.
And he saved himself a lot of money during that tour.
That's, yeah.
But he was definitely a classic.
Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of that Bull and Fred. The whole family they do not get the recognition they deserve for their place in wrestling. To me, Bull to me is one of the iconic figures of all time. He's right up there to me, right behind the Sheik as true villainous characters that should go down in history. So I wish there was more attention.
Oh yeah,
put on him, so.
and not only as a heel but a face.
Oh, it's a face too. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he had his runs in Texas and in Detroit as a face, and a tremendous one.
Absolutely,
he could do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're gonna wind it up here, Terry. We appreciate you joining us. I don't know if you have any. Do you have any social media that fans can follow, or do you kind of keep that to yourself for private purposes?
Nah, the social media thing. I never read the comments. Put it that way.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess then if
Powerbomb Wrestling, they can get in touch with me through Powerbomb Wrestling.
Absolutely.
www.excitement.com.
All right. So if anybody has anything they'd like to touch base with Terry or send him any comments, they can do that through Powerbomb Wrestling. Terry, thank you for coming on.
I'm sure they'll be inundated.
I'm sure. Well, you never know now. We appreciate you coming on, Terry, and talking with us and reflecting back on your career. It's truly an honor to speak with you today, sir.
Totally my pleasure, David.
Whatever happened to you? And we're back with Whatever Happened To, the segment where we catch up on some often overlooked names from Midwest Wrestling's past. I am Mike Isaacs, and today we are chatting with the Snakeman. How are we doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Hey, fantastic.
Celebrating the 4th.
That's absolutely right. So that means, folks, if you hear fireworks in the background, just remember, it's patriotism. No. Always for our episodes for Whatever Happened To. Tell us how you got started in pro wrestling.
Well, it was just something I always wanted to do. My great-grandmother when I was very small, and then I was working in a factory at life there in my 20s, and then some guy that come in there said he had wrestlers and sun-tanning his daughter's booth at her sun-tanning place. And I says, well, do me a favor and ask him if he'll train me. One of them agreed to doing it, and so I went and trained and done what I was supposed to and got right into it.
Wow, so
it
was a pretty smooth transition.
I always wanted to do it, and it just couldn't have worked out better.
Absolutely. So then, obviously, then it looks like you were a fan prior to wrestling. Tell us some of your earliest memories of wrestling. Who were your favorites when you were younger?
Oh, it'd have to be the Blackjacks, early Heenan days, and Dick the Bruiser, Hawks Baker, which was a personal friend, Bruiser Brody, Paul Christie, just all the old guys, Moose Cholak, Lobo Brazil, and that's the ones I was familiar with. It's out in Texas and all the different areas.
No, absolutely. But those are some of the greats, from the Midwest especially, and definitely some good, I would say, good models for wrestling and whatnot.
Right.
So then, let me ask you this: obviously, with wrestling, you get trained, you start working, you start kind of in the independent wrestling thing. You start traveling a little bit, going to place.
Right.
Where all did you work, and who all did you work for? Who were some of the more memorable people you got to work with?
Well, and then I believe one was called Midwest Territory up in Michigan, and worked up through Canada. Did some of that, and IWF, WCWO, one UWF. Several different ones, and just people would just call me, come in and do it. I just agree, and we'd do what I do.
Right. Any talent that you remember working with well from your days of wrestling?
Yeah, me and a Mac Blue from the Bruiser era had a match once, and we went tooth and nail through the whole match. It ended up being a double count out. Both of us on our knees pounding each other. One blow returned to the other blow until they finally just come in there, and the end of that one. But we both went on with some knots on our heads, I'm sure. And then I had a match with Sabu one him and the Sheik come out, chairs and tables going every which way. I did it after that one. Had a broken nose, got black eyes. But it was...
That involved Sabu that ended well.
Right.
I feel like
I hadn't been in it that long. I was in it, I don't know. You always think you're really good until you see a talent of that sort coming out. You come at it, and there you were. My trainer, he was having the chairs and tables going every which way. I just looked at him. He was just dying laughing. But anyway, we got through it.
Right.
It was,
I think it may have been Dave. He had said that it was either him or somebody else he knew had a match with Sabu. He was fairly injury prone, and I think he had his mouth wired shut, and he was still wrestling, something to that nature. But he
was in good shape that night. It was early career there because there's Rob Van Dam before he became the famous Rob Van Dam. And then, let's see, there's so many matches. Me and Bobo Brazil Jr. used to have several matches, and I've tagged with Madman Pondo. We've done cage matches against Bobo Brazil and Quicksilver, and then again on this side of the thing where I was wrestling Pondo, kid, and a lot of people out there over the years. A lot of good memories.
No, absolutely. So then I guess kind of another kind of personal question too. It's obviously as we introduced you in the beginning, you worked as the Snakeman. So tell us about the Snakeman gimmick and how it came to be. I would assume that there.
But I guess it was my look. I just had the long hair, the mustache, and then Jake Roberts, and then besides during our rival time, and we're on the same side. He just was in my early career. I was just Doug Roberts at first, and he says, you look like Jake. He says, you just go by Doug the Snake Man. And I said, well, that sounds pretty good to me. And then I just ended up just buying a little snake, grew it big enough to carry the ring, and I just kind of went as a deal. And
I'm Jake Roberts' cousin, no.
Yeah, they just said, Jake the Snake's cousin, Doug Roberts. And then it just went, and people took to the character, and I never took anything from Jake. I just did my own thing, but it was fun, and the crowd liked, whether they were heel or baby, they either liked me as a heel or hated me as a heel, but it was always an exciting time.
No, absolutely. And obviously, with all the gimmicks, that just kind of aids in, I guess you could say the storytelling, of course, but having been in the business and you having worked that period of time, do you have any favorite memories, whether it be in ring or out of ring, from the business that you remember and look back on fondly?
Oh, well, just the whole time. I just meeting the old school fellows, getting in the locker room, getting to listen to their stories and learning from them, taking little bits and pieces from every guy, and put it in your mind and making things work for you, trying to enhance your talent. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And just so many things.
No, absolutely. And this is kind of a similar question, but everybody we talked to, obviously, they wrestled and eventually had to step away from the business. And we always say that you never really retire wrestling, you just stop wrestling.
Right.
But what would you say you miss most about wrestling?
Actually, I just miss the fans. When you hear your music start and you're just behind the curtain and you just letting it build up, and you can feel the anticipation and your adrenaline rush, and then you come through the curtain and get your response, hit that ring, come through them ropes, and show begins.
Right, and it definitely did. And that's what a lot of people say that I've talked to. They always say, "Oh, I miss the traveling," or I miss having
the traveling. No, yeah, well, that can. After a long time, you get tired of the road,
No, absolutely.
But then, I started love. I in my early 30s. Years solid every weekend during the week if I can get to the show or whatever. But then I'd still get called back for a show or do something at a show once in a while. And then I'd moved out of state, but I ran into another guy that was used, and then there was a local group in the town where we were working and living, and we just went over there, and he got back into wrestling, and I become his manager. So I'm still the Snakeman. Look a little different now, but the excitement's still there, getting to go do the shows, and it's still the same. But you miss it when you're not doing it.
No, absolutely. And that's kind of what everybody says, that you never pay,
Right.
So then, and I kind of along the same lines is, obviously there's kind of like a natural progression with wrestling. You wrestle, eventually you kind of step away from it. Sometimes you come back, sometimes you don't. But after wrestling, obviously, you have to do other things to support yourself. So
right.
What did you after wrestling, and what are you up to currently?
Oh, well, while I was wrestling, I ended up having a job of 22 years, closed the doors at a Christmas time, and, well, then I had to rely on wrestling there for a little bit, and then service job here and there, and then ended up working at a junior high and high school, the Ben Davis Township area. And from there, then we moved to Tennessee, and we had a rib restaurant there for a while, and then my wife becomes sick, and we ended up getting that up, and I just got a small job. And then I moved from Tennessee into Kentucky, and I've been working at Fort Knox for the last 4 years. The big bruiser that I've been working with, his name's Lex Bain. He's a monster, a huge man.
Wow.
And, well, that's just about it now. I'm still working, and hope to retire in the next couple years.
That's right. Hey, that's nothing wrong with that. Finally getting to not have to do anything for a little bit, right?
Right.
That's not bad at all. So then it looks like you've had kind of obviously a very interesting life. I mean, I think, being in professional wrestling itself is interesting as it is.
Right.
And then I think, getting, when you have to kind of step away from that, you still have that interesting aspect of your life. And like we've said a couple of times, you always go back to it, or at least want to.
Right. Yeah.
But definitely, with wrestling, and this is something I like to ask people too, especially people who are still actively involved in it. It's obviously very different now than it used to be.
Right.
So if you had to compare wrestling from when you were wrestling and wrestling now, what would your opinion be about this current style of wrestling?
It's fine. I grew up with the old school, the old days. It didn't have all the illustration. I don't know how you do that. You know what I'm saying?
Like
commercial part of it. I think you'd come out and the lights would go down and the lights would be over the ring and do the show, and then where everybody, you come out, if you was a heel, people hated you. They believed you were the worst person around, and they'd put you with a chair themselves if they could. They didn't like you, or they either liked you. And then today it's just so over the top. I don't know. It's still fine. I still wrestling today, but I just like the old school, like what you call it. I mean, it's just because I'm not young anymore, and that's what I grew up, and that's just the way that was, I guess.
No, absolutely. You hear that pretty often. Honestly, it's either people say, "Oh, it's awful, I hate it," or it's, it is what it is. I understand things move along eventually, but a lot of people,
right?
A lot of people are like, "Oh, there's nothing like the old school. I hate the new school." But I definitely can respect those opinions, obviously. But I understand. I mean, obviously, I grew up kind of on this era. I was born in the '90s, so I kind of grew up during the Attitude Era. So obviously,
right,
more used to the current style. But having worked with Dave on this show, obviously looking golden age, and I definitely can appreciate these, matches from the, so on and so forth. But Definitely. First of all, I want to definitely thank you for coming on the show and just chit chatting with us a little bit, telling us a little bit about your career, your life a little bit. But is there a way fans can follow you on social media if they wanted to? Obviously, I know you're still active in the wrestling scene. Didn't know if you had
Yeah, I do have a Facebook. It's under my everyday name, but the wrestling under the picture. There's a picture of me when I had the snake, and on my, I don't know what you call those picture things page. So I'm easily to find on her.
No, very, very awesome.
So yeah, I'd be glad anybody wants to follow me or whatever. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
I got a lot of people on here now, and I always call you a certain show somewhere, and I can't believe I found you on people. Or
no, absolutely, and also you're still kind of absolutely.
Right now, it's called swag rap. They're really coming up in the business, and it's really turning nice. And I'm managing a wrestler, and he's a force to reckon with.
No, absolutely.
And of course, he's got the Snakeman in his corner, so anything could happen. That absolutely.
Oh gosh. Well, I definitely want to thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, it's obvious getting to talk to you, getting to hear your stories. That's what we love on the Dave Dynasty Show is stories. It's the best way to tell history. But definitely thank you for that, and thank you for your time. And you guys heard it here. He's still out there. He's still active. Go follow him on Facebook. Catch up with him. See where he's going to be at. You definitely want to go see him manage. It's fantastic. But definitely do that. And as always, of course, support independent wrestling. But, Snakeman, I want to thank you very much again for coming on the show tonight and giving us the time.
And I appreciate you having me.
Move over, Jimmy Kimmel. Step aside, Conan O'Brien. Back off, Stephen Colbert. It's my turn. I'm Mike Shea, and every Tuesday on my show, Mike Talks Funny, I sit down and talk with comedians, actors, film fans, podcasters, anybody willing to get down, get deep, and get dirty.
I don't remember the first time I had sex. That was horrible. I didn't even finish the first time I had sex.
I've tasted what most comics want, and now I have to go back and eat the leftovers.
You're so brave for wearing that shade of lipstick on stage. My God.
Think of Last Comic Standing, and Mystery Science Theater 3000 had a baby, and that's the show.
My online doppelganger is also a larger black man. He is Adrian Miller. All the top results are he's a professor.
Interviews with great people, not to mention all kinds of awesome new music every show.
Hey, this is Don Smith.
This is Scotty Mays.
Hey, this is Kevin Goatee with Comics Watching Comics.
Brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
That wraps up another week of the Dave Dynasty Show, folks. What more do you want from us? We brought you Terry Sullivan today in an exclusive first-time podcast interview. We brought you a Whatever Happened To with the Snakeman. Thank you to both those guys for coming on and chatting with us this episode. Next week, we have another spectacular interview with a guy that does not do podcast appearances. The Spirit of America, Chris Carter. Oh, my, that was a great interview. I did that with him. Cannot wait for you to hear that next episode. He will be on there. Once again, visit DaveDynasty.com for all of our links. Go out, hit all of those avenues to help support the show. Spread, like, share, get the word out there. Make sure you go to Heroes and Legends this fall in October. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get out of here. Whew, we're spent. We've given you all we've got. We'll see you next episode with Chris Carter. Until then, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.